If he consecrated it and redeemed it, it does not go out of his possession at Yovel. If his son redeemed it, it goes out to his father at Yovel. If another person redeemed it, or one other kinsman, and he redeemed it from his possession, it does not go out of his possession at Yovel. If one of the Kohanim redeemed it and it is still in his possession, he should not say, since it goes out to the Kohanim at Yovel and it is already in my possession, it is mine. Rather, it goes out to all his fellow Kohanim. If the Yovel arrived and it was not redeemed, the Kohanim enter it and pay its worth. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says they enter but do not pay. If Eliezer says they neither enter nor pay, rather it is known as an abandoned field until the second Yovel. When the second Yovel arrives, it was still not redeemed. It is known as the twice abandoned field until the third Yovel. The Kohanim never enter it until another person redeems it. If one buys a field from his father, or if his father died and he then consecrated it, it is like an ancestral field. If he consecrated it and then his father died, it is like an acquired field. These are the words of Reb Meir. Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon, however, say it is like an ancestral field, as it says, but it is the field of its acquisition, which is not the fields of its ancestral holding. It must be a field that does not stand to become the field of his ancestral holding, and that excludes this field, which stands to become the field of his ancestral holding. And the acquired field does not go out to the Kohanim at Yovel because a person cannot consecrate something that is not his. Kohanim and Leviim may always consecrate and may always redeem, both before Yovel and after Yovel.
Okay. Fine. Perek Ches Hamakdish es Sadehu. B'shah she'ena Yovel. So now we're talking about halachas that are relevant to our times, where you don't have Yovel in effect anymore. In fact, the Yovel was only in effect for a very short time, only until the exile of the 10 tribes by Sancherib. In fact, by the first conquest, when the first part of the conquest was of the loss of the land was the Ma'evela Yarden, when Reuven, Gad, and half of Manasseh, their land was taken over first. And at that point, you could no longer fulfill the right? Once you don't have all of the tribes on their land, you can't have a Yovel anymore. So at that point, all of the halachas of Yovel drop. You cannot. There's no loss of your ancestral land. But at the end of the if it was mukdash, the redemption cannot be calculated in years from the Yovel. Rather, redemption is calculated at the full value at any point in time. So remember, we said 50 shekels per base core. So that is now in effect any time. And there's no return of ancestral fields in the Yovel because we don't keep track of the Yovel anymore.
Even though Hashem and Moshe gave permission for the tribes to go over to on the other side of the Hardain, it still was not considered. It wasn't considered Eretz Israel.
It's still considered. It took on all the kedusha. The original plan was for everyone to be on the west side of the Jordan.
Right.
But once Reuven and Gad said we want to stay on this side, they kept Chumas and Masros and everything midoraisa. That was all of that land was part of Doraisa Eretz Yisrael.
So what happened to the Yovel then? Why?
That was fine. So that was fine. But once they lost their land, we're saying.
Once they lost, okay. Once they lost
their land and they were exiled, then you no longer have everyone on their land, and then the Yovel falls away. Okay, so now what's the halacha if somebody sanctifies his field during this time now? Omrim lo pesach harishon. So now the temple has this field in their possession, which they honestly can't do much with. It's not like the temple is not sort of an industry where they say, oh, now that we've got this farmland over here, let's farm it and send the profits to the temple. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but that's not their core competency. Their core competency is avoda. Avoda is a mikdash, not avoda sasadeh. Okay, so they want it to be redeemed. And they come back to the owner and say, "Look, you're the first in line to redeem it. You should be the one to state a price to redeem it." Why is that? Because the original owner has to pay a fifth on top of the price in terms of the redemption, whereas everyone else just pays whatever they said. So it brings Maseh. He said, this field is not worth my trouble. It costs me more to look after this field than what I'm actually earning from it. And so he says, forget it. He's makdish it to the temple. The temple comes back to him and says, look, we don't want it either. Don't you want to redeem it? So they said to him, you're the owner, you should bid first. Amar, Harehi Shali Isar. He says, okay, one Italian Isar. Remember what an Isar is 8 prutas.
Really nothing.
It's a joke. Okay, it's 8 prutas. And Rabbi Yossi says, Amar Rabbi Yossi lo amar ze ela bechabetza. He says, a beitza. So like a trivial amount of value, because you don't have to use literal money. You can use the equivalent of money, like metaltalim. Give him an egg. Okay. Amar lo, and the temple treasurer looked around and nobody else was making any bids and said, okay, deal closed. Mafsid isar v'sadehu lefanav. So what did he have to pay? He had to pay an isar plus the added fifth, which was if you take, because you've got 8 prutas in an isar. So when you're calculating the extra fifth, you actually have to take a quarter of the original. So he added on two prutas, so 1 isar and 2 prutas, and it was his. So the 2 prutas now is a fifth of the total 10. And Rabbi Yossi's opinion, by the way, is that you don't even need the Tanna Kama says you have to at least offer 4 prutas in redemption so that your fifth can be at least a pruta.
Oh, okay.
Whereas Rabbi Yossi says, nah, the added fifth doesn't even have to be a pruta, and it's still a good deal. Okay. Amar Echad. So if one person says, Harehi Shalib Eses Salayim. So if the Baalim just refused to do anything, and now you've just got 5 random people who are all bidding on redeeming this field. Okay. Amar Echad Harehi Shalib Eses Salayim. It's mine for 10 selah. And the next one says, I'll outbids and says, I'll say 20. And the next guy says 30, and the next guy says 40, and the next guy says 50. So you got 5 bidders all the way up to 50. Okay, and the temple treasurer comes up to them and says, okay, Mr. 50, give me your money. And he picks up his pockets and says, oh, you know what? I just checked with my wife, and she said we don't want to pay this. Okay. So then they say to him, okay, well, you've caused us a loss of 10 selah because we're going to have to fall back on the guy before you who has 40. So they will take security from him until he pays 10 selah. Okay, and that's going to be his loss. Now the dominoes start falling. Excuse me. Yeah. So now the dominoes start falling, and the guy with 40 makes some excuse, and then they say, okay, well, you caused us a loss of 10 down. So each one of them falls down. The one of 20 also has to pay 10, and they'll take security from him to make sure he pays the 10. Yes, I don't know what happened, if I snorted some pepper or something. Now comes the guy who bid 10. Well, he didn't cause them a loss of 10 selah because somebody's going to buy the field. They try and sell the field again. And let's say a guy comes up and says, okay, I'll pay 3 for the field. So what did he cause? He caused a loss of 7. Now they take 7. So they take 7 of him, of the last guy. Okay. So just to see that inside the Mishnah, if the one of 10s reneged, they sell the field for its value, and they take away from him the difference. Okay. Now what happens if the original owner comes and says, I'm bidding 20. And somebody else comes and says also 20. So So the owner is going to win it because he adds on the chomesh, and therefore there's still more to the temple. So hold on a second. Now the Mefarshim also explain that this calculation of each one coming down is paying the difference between him and the person lower than him is only if they're falling down like dominoes. But if they all absconded and all said, no, we're not going to give it all at once, then they actually split the difference evenly. So, for example, if you had one guy who bid 10, a second guy who bid 20, and a third guy who bid 24, and that was where the auction ended. So and then the last two guys disappeared, or they ran away and said, no, we decided we don't want to. So now all they've got is the 10, and what have they lost is 14. So that 14 gets split evenly between these two guys. Okay, so because they absconded together, so they collectively caused a loss of 14 to the temple, and they've each got to pay 7. Okay, Mishna Gimel. Amar Echad Harehi Sheri Be'esrim V'achas. So now this is a situation where the Baalim bid 20, and now some random third party is coming and saying, I want to redeem this for more. So he says 21. Okay, so now the Baalim is going, because the Baalim, because he's adding the fifth, he's already up for 25. But that's 25 including the Chomesh. So now not only do we tell the Baalim that he has to pay the 25, but he has to meet the price, meet the core price that somebody else bid. Okay? Baalim nosnim esrim v'shesh. So now he has to add that one seller onto the total price that he has to pay, so 25 plus 1. Now we don't force him to give chomesh on top of that extra, on top of the extra that somebody else outbid him, because this is coming against his will. He didn't really want to pay in that extra. But again, the auction carries on, and somebody says 22. We say to the Baalim, okay, you're paying 27. 23, you pay 28. 24, he pays 29. Now somebody comes and says 25. So now some other random guy comes and says, okay, I'm paying 25. The Mishnah actually over here says that the Baalim must give 30. And this is actually is not accurate, because the Mishnah is leaving something out. It's Ki'ilu, the Baalim originally said 20 and 1 pruta, because then his extra amount would be would still be like 5. Then his total that he'd be offering would be 25 and 1 pruta after the Chomesh. And therefore the 25 that somebody else said still hasn't outbid him, because if it actually Taka does outbid him, or if it's equal, then the Baalim can walk away and say, listen, I'm not causing any loss to the temple. He offered 25, I'm effectively offering 25, take his offer. And that would be a fair claim. Okay. But getting back to our case, where each time we add on, we force the Baalim to give more according to what people are bidding within his Chomesh. We don't force him to pay Chomesh on the extra that he's being dragged into paying. So somebody outbids him and says 26. So if the Baalim say, something, I actually, Taka, want to keep my field, then he now has to say, he can say 26, but then he now also has to give the Chomesh on top of that, because now it's voluntary. So 26 plus an extra quarter, so that will come up to 30. That'll come up to 31 and a dinar. Okay, so Baalim Kodmim, the owners come first. The Imlav Omrim Higiascha, and if not, then we say to the third party buyer, it's fine, it's yours, you win. You outbid the original owner, and now the field becomes yours. Okay, and that is it.
Now, Gimel base.
Yeah.
There is to the law of the ancestral land an element of leniency as well as an element of stringency. How so? Whether one consecrates the field in the environs of a town, or whether one consecrates the field in the orchards of Sabasta. He gives for the land. He gives for the area of the land in which a koma of barley is sown. For 50 shekels for an acquitted 50 shekels. I'm sorry, 50 silver shekels for an acquired field if he gives his word. But Eliezer says it is the same for the ancestral land, which is for the acquired field. What then is the difference between the ancestral field and the acquired field? Only that the ancestral field it gives a fifth, but the acquired field it does not give a fifth. There is the law of Mulab Bull that's killed a slave, an element of leniency as well as an element of stringency. How so? Whether it killed a handsomest slave or the ugliest slave, it gives 30 selim. If it killed a free man, he gives his word. If it wounded either one of them or that one, he pays full damage. There are to the laws of the violator and the introducer elements of leniency as well as elements of stringency. How so? Whether he violated or introduced the daughter of the most prominent fellow of Kohanim or one of the humblest family of Israel, he gets 50 selim. But as for the payments of disgrace and debasement, all depends upon the status of the one who was disgraced and the one who was disgraced.
Okay. Okay, Chulin, Yud Aleph Beis.
How many are considered many? Beis Shammai say 2 sheep, as it is stated. A man will sustain a calf and two sheep. Beis Hillel says 5, and as it is stated, 5 prepared sheep. Reb Dosa ben Harkin says 5 sheep, each of which is shorn of a mana and a half, are subject to the law of the first of the fleece. But the sages say 5 sheep that is shorn of any amount. How much will we give him? The weight of the 5 selim in Judah and the equivalent of 10 selim in Galil. Fleece, but not dirty, enough to make a small garment out of it. As it is stated, you shall give to him that there should be enough in it for a gift. He did not manage to give it to him until he dyed it. It is being exempt. He bleached it but did not dye it. He's obligated. And one buys a fleece of a Gentile sheep, he is exempt from the first of the fleece. If one buys a fleece of another sheep, if the seller left some over, the seller is obligated. If he did not leave anything over, the buyer is obligated. If he had 2 kinds, the dark ones and white ones, and he sold him the dark ones but did not the white one, the males but not the females, this one must give for himself and that one must give for himself. The mitzvah of sending away from the nest applies both in the land and outside the land. When the temple exists and when the temple does not exist, to unconsecrated birds and not to consecrated birds. The stringency of this mitzvah is covering the blood over the mitzvah of sending away from the rest of the nest. That is the mitzvah of covering the mitzvah of sending away from the nest is that the mitzvah of covering the blood applies to both beast and fowl, whether at one's disposal or not at one's disposal, whereas the mitzvah of sending away from the nest applies only to fowl, and it applies only to those not at one's disposal. Which are those not at one's disposal? Examples of geese or chickens that nested in the orchard, but if they needed in the house, and similarly, Herodian doves, he's exempt from sending away. Okay.
One more.
One is exempt from sending away a non-kosher bird. If a non-kosher bird sits on the eggs of a kosher bird, or a kosher bird sits on the eggs of a non-kosher bird, one is exempt from sending it away. Male partridge, Reb Eliezer says that one is obligated to send it away, but the sages exempt.
Okay, tomorrow we're going to finish Chulin, and the next day we start Bechoros.
All right, I think we have, all right. Bechoros, we're going to Bechoros again?
So we're going back to Bechoros, yeah. Okay.
Arias. An anointed Kohen who sinned and then passed from the position of anointment, and similarly a king who sinned and then passes from his position of his greatness. The anointed kings bring a bull and the king brings a he-goat. The anointed Kohen who passed from his position of appointment and then sinned, and similarly the king who passed from the position of greatness and then sinned. The anointed Kohen brings a bull and the king is like a commoner. If they sinned before they were appointed and then appointed, they are like a commoner. If Shimon says it was known to them before they were appointed, they are liable, and after they were appointed, they are exempt. Who is the Nasi? Who is the Nasi? This is the king, as it says, and he will do one of the commands of Hashem, his God. That is the Nasi who has none above him, but Hashem, his God.
Okay.
And then we are on to Kedushin. Solid. If one says to his agent, "Go out and betroth so and so for me in such and such a place," and he went and betrothed her in a different place, she is not betrothed. If he said she is in such and such a place and he betrothed her in a different place, she is betrothed. If one betrothed,
The difference being, is it an instruction that he wants her to get the kiddushin in that place, or is it that just an advice? I think she's over there. Okay.
betroths a woman on condition that she is not under any vows, and it is found that she is under vows, she is not betrothed. If he married her without making any stipulations, and it is found that she is under vows, she may be divorced without a ketubah. If he betrothed her on condition that she has no bodily defects, and such defects were found upon her, she is not betrothed. If he married her without making any stipulations, and bodily defects were found upon her, she may be divorced without a ketubah. Any bodily defects that disqualify Kohanim also disqualify women. If one betroths two women with the vow of Betruta, or one woman with less than the vow of Betruta, even though he sent gifts afterwards, she is not betrothed because he sent them on account of the original Kedushin. The same applies to a minor who is betrothed.
Okay.
And go on to Shabbos. Person may count his guests and desserts early, but not from a written note. And he may cast lot with his children and the members of the household for portions at the table, provided he does not intend to wager a large portion against a small portion because of the prohibition of gambling. And Kohanim may cast lots for sacrifices on Yom Tov, but not for portions. A person may not hire workers on the Sabbath, nor may a person tell his friend to hire workers for him. We may not go out to wait nightfall at the Sabbath boundary for the purpose of hiring workers and bringing produce. But one may await nightfall to enable him to watch and bring produce in his hand. Abishol just stated a general rule: whatever I am permitted to instruct on the Sabbath, I am permitted to wait nightfall for it. We may await nightfall at the Sabbath boundary to extend to the affairs of a bride and to the affairs of the deceased, to bring a coffin and shrouds for him. If a Gentile brought fruits on the Sabbath, the Jew may not be well with them unless they came from a nearby place. And if they made a coffin for him and dug a grave for him, the Jew may be interred in it. Or if it was done for a Jew, he may never be interred in it. We may
That's it. That's three. And mikvahos.
And mikvahos. A tummy water fell into it, and then a tahor person drank from it, and it became tummy. If a tummy water fell into it, and then one drew water from it into a tahor vessel, it becomes tummy. If tummy water fell into it, and then a loaf of truma fell into it, and he rinsed it, it becomes tummy. If he did not rinse it, it becomes tahor. The Red Shimon says whether he has rinsed it or he did not rinse it, it becomes tummy. If a corpse fell into it, and a tummy or a tummy person walked through it, and then a tahor person drank from it, he remains tahor. Water in water holes, water in cisterns, water in ditches, water in caves, water seeping, and mikvahs that did not contain 40 saw are all alike. During the rainy season, they are all deemed tahor. When the rain ceased, those near town or road are deemed tameh. Those are distant from are deemed tameh until tahor until such a time they are many walkers. When do they become purified? Beis Shammai says when they are increased by a greater amount and also overflow. Beis Hillel says that they were increased by a greater amount, even though they did not overflow. Reb Shimon says that for overflow. Reb Shimon says that if they overflowed, even though they were not increased by a greater amount, they are fit for challah and for ritual rinsing of the hands.
Okay.
All right, you got to get going.
I got to get going.
Okay. Bye. Thanks. Bye.